Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Good Deeds Note Investing Podcast, Open Mic Night. I am your co-host, Gail Anthony Greenberg, here with the always surprising Christopher Seveny.
Hey, Gail, like my haircut?
It's beautiful.
So,
I was just thinking, like, your hair is hanging in there pretty well. Do you have good hair in your family?
no,
No.
no, but I mean, it from the fact of from a losing it perspective,
Yeah.
my grandfather was a silver fox on one side and the other side was bald. So it was kind of, I got my dad's side, but
It's like you're
so
hanging in
I
there
don't,
really
I
well.
really don't think people are here to learn about my hair though.
Well, I don't know.
Maybe
Maybe
some
so.
hairy assets, but not hair on my head.
All right. Lord. Forget the happy talk. We're like a morning show.
Yes. Plus the Patriots are on tonight, and it's Game 5 against
So now we
Tampa
find out what
and Astros as well. So let's
the
get
real
going.
urgency here. Okay, well, let's just start talking immediately about things that people are asking about. Do you want to talk about forced place insurance letters?
Yeah, actually, you'd probably be better to discuss this because
I've
I
sent,
use Madison, and
yeah, I've sent a
Madison
lot of
sends the
these.
letters.
Yes, I've sent a lot of these. So I use JB Lloyd for my insurance. And when I first became aware early on that I could send these letters to people and then start charging their insurance to their loan if they didn't start getting insurance on their own, I was very excited. I mean, now, honestly, like with a lot of the loans that I have are land contracts. I don't know if those people are really ever going to get to the ends of their loans and they're ever going to reimburse me for their insurance. I basically look at it as something that I pay for liability reasons. But yes, to your point, um, Beth Boyso, when I asked her, gave me copies of the letters that you send, but
Mhm.
they are available online also,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, they're standard form letters that actually I think somebody puts them out there, whether it's CFPB or somebody, but they're pretty
Okay, cool.
standard form letters.
Yeah, and the main thing that they say is like, we don't have proof of your insurance, so we have obtained insurance. It's very possible that the insurance that we have is more expensive and not as good as insurance that you could obtain on your own. But basically, you need to show us proof of your insurance, and until you do, we have no choice but to buy our own insurance, and it is being charged to your loan. So I saw a reference recently to 3 letters. There's actually only 2 required.
Mhm.
You send them 30 days apart, and you don't have to send them certified or anything. You don't really have to do, much. You just send them. And once you've done that and tell your servicer that you've done that, then they will ask you for like the individual, um,
Mhm.
what do you call it? The bill for
Mhm. Yep.
um,
Mhm.
each insurance policy, like basically the insurance notification. Like I pay
Declaration.
my, yeah, yeah, it's not even like
Mhm.
I pay when you have like a master policy and then
Mhm.
each individual property is just like a little piece of that.
Mhm.
Premium, yes, thank you, David. I was actually trying to think of like the notification.
Mhm.
On JB Lloyd, it's called a notification. You generate
Mhm.
that. And even though I pay the insurance
Mhm.
monthly, it will generate an annual premium.
Mhm.
You send that
Yeah.
to your servicer,
Mhm.
and they will just slam that baby onto the loan.
Yep.
And we may or may not ever see the money, but
Mhm. So here's how I'll explain how I run the insurance. The day that I buy those notes, usually that day or next day, I send Beth or JB Lloyd a spreadsheet of basically they have a template that I fill out that template and send it to them, and I put insurance on the properties. So,
you don't go into you don't just go into their
well,
portal and just do it.
little secret: if you're buying like more than 10,
No.
They'll put them in for you.
Okay, how many people buy more than 10, like,
So
regularly?
yes. So okay. So if you
Okay.
buy a note, you buy the note and you log into the portal, literally, the next day, a few days later, whatever it is, I put insurance based on the date that I acquired the note. Now, people are going to say, well, why are you doing that if you haven't notified the borrower yet? Well, here's the reason why. With JB Lloyd, and I'm not sure how, I know one makes you pay the full year in advance, but JB Lloyd, you're paying monthly. And what happens is if you find out that that borrower has insurance, you just send them the proof of insurance and they will retroactively cancel that and not charge you.
Yeah, they refund
They
whatever you.
refund you.
Yeah.
So you're putting insurance on it, even though you don't know sometimes, or if you could check the servicing history, you can see whether or not the borrower had it or not. But I put the insurance on it no matter what. And, worst case is if I don't get refunded $50, for a month or whatever it is, then you're out $50, but the insurance is well worth the risk.
Yeah, if it's a contract for deed, you have liability. I mean, that's like
Yeah.
a really big part of it too. Say you're
Mhm.
willing to lose the money that you've got invested in the house
Mhm.
because it burns down. That's one thing, but
Mhm.
you don't want to be personally liable for
Yeah.
something that happens.
Now, back to the question about the letters. Certain servicers will send the letters for you, certain ones don't. So when you interview your servicer, that's a question to ask because Madison Management sends those letters for you. So, you don't need to send those letters if you use Madison.
You always have like full service with them, right? You don't do client managed. Like, will they do it if you're client managed? Just paying
Uh,
over.
well, typically when a loan gets boarded, I have it as full service.
Mhm.
Typically I only transfer it to client managed after we're in foreclosure, bankruptcy, or there may be a point in time where if it's not, after a month or two, I will swap it out, but I intentionally kind of keep it um, managed by them to start because I'd rather have them deal with all of that, and for them to remember to send out the letters and stuff. To me, it's worth $50. So
Mhm. $50 being the difference between the $40 you pay for
yep,
servicing
and the
client
95.
managed versus
Yep,
90 full
correct.
service. Got it. Yeah. So if you have a contract for deed,
Mhm.
once that deed transfers to you, you have to have insurance.
Yep.
You could be personally liable. Yes, you probably have an LLC, but
Yeah. Anyone can sue anybody for anything. Just remember
anyone
that.
can. Yes,
So,
exactly.
Sylvia asked question, is that through Madison? The insurance itself, now you can get force place insurance through your servicer. And a lot of times the servicers use the same people, but what they do is they'll mark it up by like 10 or 15 extra dollars. And, granted, if it's a performing asset, you got the borrower who's paying that. But if it's non-performing, then, it's probably coming out of your pocket.
Yeah,
So,
bad money after good.
yeah. I just find it easier to control it because also if you get it and the borrower has it and you try and get that refund from Madison, good luck.
Yeah, money only goes one direction with Madison.
So good. Any other questions on our open mic night on besides insurance? What else
Yeah,
people
wait a
throw
minute.
out there?
Before we leave insurance, do you know who Madison uses? I
JB
guess,
Lloyd.
oh, do they? Okay.
Or who's the other one? Who's the other one that
Diversified. Is that what it's
yeah,
called?
US Risk? No, or is that JB Lloyd?
That's JB Lloyd.
Yeah, hold on, I'll tell you. Ross
Yeah,
Diversified.
Ross
Yep.
Diversified.
Yeah.
Thank you, David.
So yeah, Ross Diversified, I started out using, and the policies were good, but you had to pay a year in advance. And if you're paying, let's see, 10 notes at, $1,000 a month, that's 10 grand coming out of your pocket, and then you're getting back in 3 months. It's, and then you have to mail the check. It's a lot of money going out of your pocket. So
Yes,
yeah.
try to hold it.
Yes.
Hold the money.
So, but don't spend it on things you shouldn't. uh, so, what else? What other topics? people want to have us cover tonight. We've got a pretty
Yeah,
good
we would also
cast of
love,
characters.
I'll just say this and give people a chance to work up their courage. We would love, if anyone would love to come on and just talk about, uh, you know, something they're working on, maybe struggling with. That's always so much fun.
Does anyone on have a note or an asset right now they're working out, or it might be non-performing and they're kind of in flux of what should I do? Where should I go with it?
Yeah.
Don't be shy.
Do we have any first timers working on their first notes?
So,
Oh, David's calling.
yeah. So David said yes. David, do you want to come on? And Christina said, how are charges for FBI charged to borrower? How does it show up on their end? It's part
Yeah.
of the escrow. So along
The
with
charge, it doesn't
Yep.
become part of the balance.
Yep.
Everyone
So
always asks that.
actually, let me see if I can share my screen real quick, and I'll pop up in Madison. Just one net. Let's see if
So
David
you have a
wants to.
visual aid of some sort? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Let's see. Actually, I don't want to do that one because that one's in litigation. Stay
You're
away
suing
from that
them,
one.
the other one's suing you.
This one's probably got insurance, I'm guessing. Yeah, he's got his own insurance. Did David want to come on?
I think there's a yes. Okay.
Okay. So let's.
Okay, I'm reading.
Everyone I keep looking for has their own insurance. I know one that doesn't, but I don't want to bring that one
For
up.
you. I have a whole bunch who don't have any insurance.
So basically, for people who use Madison, on the front page of the loan detail, if you scroll down, there's a charges and information. In there, you can see it would show your forced place insurance, and that would be considered sometimes in advance or as part of the escrow, depending on whether it's performing or not performing, and that's where it goes. So, okay, let me bring David on.
David Schultz. He's French, you know.
I love the doorbell.
Yeah, I know. Honey, get the door.
Let's see here. I'll make David a co-host.
Can't believe my dogs didn't bark at the doorbell.
So,
you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hey, David, hear you. Can't see you. Do you have a?
I have a video. I got my laptop in the car, so video. I just don't know how to.
You should see like a little video camera with a slash through it.
In the bottom left.
Bottom. There you are. Hello.
Oh, yeah. Here. So anyway, you asked about first timers going through non-performing, and I had a performing CFD that I got last year, and it was a pretty good deal. It was about $16,000, and
what was the UPB?
The UPB was about $37,000, and the home, Zillow had it around 60 to 70. I was like, okay, this seems pretty safe, 16,000. It's not a bad thing, and so I went and got it, picked it up, and then they were paying ahead. So wow, what could go wrong? Well, what could go wrong is they split up, and then they stopped paying. And I tried reaching out. I tried, and because this is Nebraska. That was my first mistake because Madison doesn't service Nebraska, Ally doesn't service Nebraska, so I had to go with FCI.
Ooh.
Yeah. So, and so far I know we've said some negative things about them, but their customer service with me at least has been pretty good. They're answering the phones or they're answering emails. So I'm having good luck, and so fingers crossed that continues. And so right now, they've stopped paying, and then I'm doing the foreclosure process. And Anyone that's a contractor deed, the lawyer said, no, we're going to do the foreclosure. It's better, and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, all right, I don't know. I'll just take your word for it because you're the lawyer. You're in Nebraska, I'm not. And so, so now we're in the foreclosure process. And then the one strange thing about this one is that they had to assign a military something. And I asked them about that, and they said, oh, we do this for all the cases, because one time they went through the process, and because they didn't check for the military to see if they were the military.
Service member relief, yep.
Exactly. And it turned around and burned them. And so they do that now for everyone, this particular law firm. And so right now, the thing that we have is a hearing on this is the first hearing. It's apparently it's by telephone, and it's a couple of weeks. So that's what's on my list. And this is the first non-performing I've ever had. So a little nervous about how it's going to go and what's going to happen. And I doubt very seriously. I did get a hold of the borrower one time and did talk to her, and it was very nice. And said, look, what can we, what kind of, what's going on, and try to work it out. And,
so are they actually battling about like who keeps the house or who should be paying for the house, or?
They won't even, the borrower won't even talk to me. I've called multiple times, and apparently, when I call, because I'm not calling for my personal number, I have a 800 number, and I use that, and then she's automatically blocking them. But she has my number. She knows how to get a hold of me now, and but they never answer the phone whatsoever, and I can't get anything. All I know is that her husband left, and it's just her. So, and it's only $300 a month. And that's what's unreal. I mean, the rent in this area is $600 a month in Nebraska, in this particular town. And so better off trying to make a deal with me, but it just, I tried, and she didn't answer the phone. She didn't have any, when I already had insurance, because I couldn't find any proof in the documentation. So I went ahead and got forced placed with Ross Diversified, and, did like you said, Chris, just get it on there and then try to get the proof later on, but they never gave me proof and didn't answer the letters whatsoever. So I just went ahead and got it on there
Yeah. So how long ago did they actually stop paying? Like, when did you buy it? How long did they pay?
Bought it in June of last year, and at the time, I got a couple payments, and then they paid a couple more times, and so I think I had December's payment in October. So I'm jumping for joy. Bought it cheap, and they were paying ahead of time. And then December rolls around, and no more payments. And then January comes around, and then I start calling and trying to get a hold of them and try to get the ball moving. And
you're probably thinking, well, it's the holidays. Maybe they got a little behind.
Well, I don't know. They just would never answer the phone. And then one of the numbers I had was a wrong number. By the time I found out it's a wrong number, wasted a lot of time.
So, David, you mentioned there's a hearing coming up. Is it a foreclosure hearing, mediation hearing? What type of hearing do you know?
I'd have to look up the term. It's
a Nebraska thing.
It's in Nebraska, and it's the hearing, and the lawyer said that as soon as this hearing is over and they haven't done it, they can file immediately a motion for relief or something. Or maybe that's something right. So she says it's actually pretty quick in Nebraska. Once this hearing goes, it's pretty quick, and she expects that within a couple of weeks after this hearing, they should have the house back, unless, of course, she declares bankruptcy.
Right. So when did you actually start legal? Like, I assume you sent a demand letter at the beginning?
Right. The attorneys did a demand letter, and
was that in January, February, March, April, somewhere?
No, it was actually a little later. It was around May.
Huh.
Right. I know, my first one, and trying to be positive, and she did try to. When I looked at the servicing notes, she was calling in and said how much did she owe, and then she said, and then in the servicing notes that she was going to call back in a couple of weeks with payment, pay him by check, and she did one time. So she actually did make a January payment, and then the note said that she was going to call in and pay and get caught up at the end of February. So I wasn't going to do anything. She was already calling in, and but about that time, that's when March and April rolls around. I'm trying to call her and try to get some details, what's going on. And then I found out that they had split up because I finally did. And when I called, she wouldn't answer the phone because she was split up, and her husband they were split up, and apparently was using some free 800 numbers to call her and trying different phone numbers to call her, and she didn't answer. So she didn't know it was me. But I finally, when I did get a hold of her and talk to her, I gave her my number. I said, "You got my number. If I call, please talk." And she sounded like she really wanted to stay. And but it was in June, and she said that she was waiting for her tax returns. And I was like, "Well, when do you expect them?" She goes, "Well, I have to file them." It's like, and then she didn't want to file them because her husband was going to be on it. And I says, "Well, you've got to do something." And I told her that she had to think about her position and what she would like to do. And I immediately started talking about, at this point, I'm realizing that she's not going to be able to afford to stay. And I hinted at, maybe I could do some financial assistance, cash for keys and get her out. And she didn't seem receptive to that, unfortunately. And I basically, by the time I got off the phone, I said, okay, let me know within a week, what would you like to do? Kind of give her a week. And it actually ended up being 2 weeks. It was like over the 4th of July holidays, I think, was coming around, and I just gave her a couple weeks. Nothing, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you mentioned, with the payment being in the 300s and rents in the 600s, it works for you and against you. It's working against you now because if she moves out, she's gonna have to pay double the payment. If she can't pay the 300, how's she gonna pay the 600? So it's almost like she's probably feeling stuck and figuring, hey, I'm just gonna ride this out for as long as possible. And
that's exactly what's going on now. I checked the servicing notes again. If she had called in a few weeks ago and asked what her options were, because we already went through the steps, demand letters, and things like that. She didn't respond to those, and but she did call FCI a few weeks ago and asked what your options were. They said you got to call the lender at this point that's under foreclosure and try to work something out. And then I was kind of hoping that maybe she would want to try to work something out, but no, I don't think so. I think exactly what you're saying. She's riding this out, and I'm just moving forward. I did as best as I could to give her as many chances as possible. And anyway, maybe too many chances, but it is what it is.
It's tough. She doesn't sound like someone who is sort of a career.
It did not sound. It did not sound at all that she was one of these type of people that goes around. They actually, been there for several years, and they did a modification previously. They were doing really well, and they made payments ahead of time. I didn't see anywhere in there where they were, overly late, like over a month or anything like that. That after the modification. So I was really trying, but when I found out it was split up, unfortunately, she doesn't have a very high-paying job, and she's not getting a lot of hours. It sounds like she's part-time, making just a little bit, like $8.50 an hour in Nebraska. But,
it's a shame. She's probably not in a hot Airbnb area where she can rent out.
No. And so, once this goes through, now I'm going to have a house to, deal with. And I kind of wish I could take off a few weeks and go there and see it and, look at it, but I can't do that.
We always say there's nothing like Nebraska in February. I think
it's October now. Hey, David, few questions. One is, on the contract for deed, are both borrowers on it, or is it just her or just him?
Both borrowers.
Okay, so that makes it a little trickier too. As part of any deal, you'd almost have to, if he's gone and you work something out, you'd have to have him relinquish his rights to her. And the other question one person asked is, who were you using for an attorney? Was it through FCI or did you find your own?
Well, as you know, FCI, whenever you have loans with them, you have to use their approved attorneys. And so they gave me 2 or 3 attorneys that they used in Nebraska, and I called and reached out to each one of them, and none of them were interested in this case, unfortunately. So I went back to them and said, have anybody else? Actually, there was one person interested, but they were really expensive. And then I asked if they had anybody else, and they gave me this other name. And I called them up. They seemed really reasonably priced. They were actually in a town over, so really close by, and they're still pretty expensive. I mean, they're I think the demand letters you've been saying are about $75. This one was $200. So
I paid $450 for one. So.
wow.
Yes.
So this was a learning experience. This was a learning experience, and the thing
Yeah,
was,
no, I mean, it sounds like it's actually going well. I can really relate to how excruciating it is when you have someone who, keeps giving you hope over and over again, and you're just sort of
right,
like right there.
right.
My famous, I spent 24 hours in the airport in Jamaica, where like every 2 hours they told us the plane was about to come, and then it never came. And like all told, 24 hours of this, like, hope stashed over and over again. When you think about it, like you could have had a nice day on the beach. Like you didn't have to be there getting disappointed over and over again. So it's just, it's emotionally difficult. I'm sure it's very difficult for her also.
When I did talk to her, I did find out that the basement was flooded one time. So I'm not looking forward to knowing what's in there when
that's just
I get somebody in there.
You're just some pump away from.
She had to rent a sump pump. She rented one and pumped it out. That was a couple of years ago, apparently. So.
Hey, David, I had another question for you, because a lot of people who are on here and listen are always so fearful of talking to borrowers. And Gail, basically convinced me to start talking to borrowers. And a lot of people sometimes I think feel intimidated, or just scared to call the borrowers. And, this is kind of like one of your first notes you bought on your own. You're talking to the borrowers. Can you just, give people some confidence and just share your experience of kind of, it's just really people talking, but I'm curious, if you could give an opinion.
Yeah. Were you nervous about calling the borrower the first time? You
know what? Absolutely. I was really nervous, and there was, I think there was a podcast. I don't know if it was you guys or somewhere I was reading about how to talk to borrowers, and I talked to you, Chris, a couple of days before. Things to say, and I knew to do the Miranda and things like that. And just a side note, I was actually more nervous in the military. My job was I was an interrogator. So I was, but that's a different thing. But I was still pretty nervous. I'm talking to somebody that maybe is going through a hard time, and the thing that I did, and even though I was nervous, I can tell she's nervous too. And I just basically just used a very soft voice and just asking, what's going on, and what are your plans, and here's the situation, and things like that, and what would you like, or what are your goals, and what kind of what do you foresee. And she kept foreseeing herself as being in that house. And she was trying to figure out ways to afford it. And so we started talking about her job and some of the expenses that she has. She has 2 daughters. I think one of them had some health issues. I didn't know much more than that, but just some health issues, you just said. And so basically, I was just more of a sympathetic voice, and
you just were yourself. You were your nice.
Right. Just being sympathetic, and I said that we're a small company, and I didn't tell them I was the one making the decisions. I just said we're a small company, and we don't like to run somebody's day, and we'd like to work something out, but you're going to have to decide. Just basically said you are going to have to decide, how you would like to proceed. Here are your options. If there's anything that we can discuss, let me know. And I told her, here's my phone number. I'm always available by phone, and I'm not a mean guy. I don't think I said those exact words, but I'm easy to talk to.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that was the last time I was ever able to talk to her.
Yeah.
I try and humanize a conversation, ask people how's their day going. And, one of the things I typically will ask them is, we're trying to work with you. How can we help you? you know, when you ask somebody, when you say, you know, how can we help you? People kind of, I think it's almost like an icebreaker in a sense
Right.
as well. But so I don't know. I haven't
Yeah,
had
I
too
think
much experience, but.
that's a good point too. Like, you know, when people say they can't afford it and then we send them like the financial package where they give us all their financial
Mhm.
information and everything. Like, it always felt a little weird to me that we would look at a financial package and decide what they can afford. Like, you really need to ask somebody what they're prepared to pay, because it
Mhm.
doesn't really matter what they can afford. You know, if you're not a priority with them, and we can't make ourselves a priority somehow, it doesn't really
Mhm.
matter how much they have.
Well, it's, you know, when people say, you know, come to me and say, well, how much do I need to pay on a monthly basis? You know, I go back to them and say, well, we need to see how much you can afford, because I can throw a number out there, but if the number doesn't fit your budget and you can't afford it, it doesn't matter what that number is. You know, if I say $1,000 and the most you can afford is 600, you know, I'm not getting the 1,000. So let's work to a common goal to try and get to a point that, now, if the person's making 100 grand a year, of course, it's not going to be a $300 a month payment, but, you know, you need to kind of, and that's where sometimes it's good to, you know, I never make a decision right then on the phone. I always, like, I think we've talked in past episodes, say, you know, we got to go, you know, I got to bring it back and, you know, talk to the investors and partners on, you know, on any deal. But, you know, that's one thing too, as a component, is trying to work to that number, is just understanding, yeah, you can, I mean, I can throw any number out there, but if people can't afford it, it's, you know, it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Yeah, so I think you really handled it very well, Dave,
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Good.
My first one.
and actually, I mean, this is not a harrowing story. It's very unfortunate that it's going the way it is. And you're going to end up with a house. I mean, the house hopefully will be in decent condition and something that
Right.
you have a
One
decent
thing,
time.
one thing I noticed is that she waited until um, the demand letter was about to expire. You know, you have 30 days, and she called me like that Friday. That day it expired. To say, what can we do?
Hmm.
And I mean, what are your guys' experiences? Do the borrowers always wait to that last second and follow through ever, or are they generally the ones that follow through are the ones that call you immediately?
Yeah, my borrowers have called me immediately. Like, they get very
Mhm.
spooked, and I mean, if they're serious about keeping the house and they
Yeah.
think they can, I think they call you right away.
Mhm.
I think you have really nailed it, hit the
Mhm.
nail on the head with her. Like, she is trying to buy herself some time, either because she's
Mhm.
trying to figure out how to get it together, or
Mhm.
she just doesn't have any options and she doesn't want to
Mhm.
deal with whatever's next.
Mhm. So,
Probably one of
so,
the
so
issues.
here's one for you, David. You know, quiz you on this one. So
Uh-oh.
I've got a borrower who, you know, we send the demand letter. Demand letter expires. We file the complaint. It's a CFD. So a complaint is a lawsuit, basically, which gives them another 30 days to answer. So they need to pay $3,500 to reinstate. And this is in Michigan or Indiana, I forget which state, but no, it's $1,100 to file a complaint. Their reinstatement, like I said, is about $3,500. You know, they send in a check for $1,500. Now, if you accept the $1,500, you have to drop the complaint, or you send the $1,500 back to them and continue with the complaint. So it's kind of like you're almost damned if you do, damned if you don't, because you don't want to foreclose on this person, but this is the third time that you've had to send the demand letter that they've continued to reinstate. But in
Yeah.
the same instance, you know, it's you know, these are the situations you run in all the time. As you start to grow, it's kind of, and these are the gray areas where you don't know what the right or wrong answer is. So it's like, okay, you owe me 3,500, they cut you a check for 15, you know, it's going to cover your,
Yeah.
basically your legal bills. Do you take the
Yeah.
money and work with them and
And so
start
you
the
have to
process over again, or
refile
what do you do?
because that's the last time
Well,
they give you money. Yeah, it's like liar's poker, like
Mhm.
who's
Mhm.
psyching each other out. Yeah, I mean, I think when people have legitimate problems and they really legitimately want to work it out, they call you, or they certainly answer when you call them. And if people are kind of, they're hard to reach, they're not getting back, they're waiting to the last second, that's a desperate person who doesn't have, their next move figured out, I think, but they're not coming back to you unless they win the lottery, probably.
So Eric Smith mentioned if you get the house back, he lives in Omaha, so he could go buy for you.
Woo!
Oh,
Yeah, where in
awesome.
Nebraska is it, David?
Cozad.
Is that
Cozad, it's
or something?
Lexington?
Cornfields?
Yeah. Well, here's the good news. It's not out in the boonies. It's in a town, and it's only a couple blocks away from a hospital.
Oh.
Yeah.
So,
what would you do with it if you get it back? I mean, I assume you are getting it back.
Well, yeah, I'm going to get it back, and I was very inspired by your podcast last week with Bill Reesmeyer, and where I'm not going to rehab it, but I think he's just how he owner financed it. I'll probably do something like that, just put it for sale and owner finance it if I have to, and take cash if I can. Not really wanting to do anything in Nebraska. It was just, as you guys said, sometimes good opportunities present itself. Don't always stick in a couple of states. If a good opportunity exists over here, why not? And don't be afraid of it.
Well, I'm encouraged about Nebraska from what you've said. It doesn't sound too expensive or too difficult to, do something legal there. So.
But remember, you have to go through FCI.
Yes. Chris,
they've been pretty decent with me.
I mean, basically, it's helpful. So they've gotten in my way when I've had an attorney that I wanted to use, and he wasn't, or she wasn't on their list. But, I've also had them approve someone. You can ask them to vet someone if you, have a great attorney recommended by other people. I think in some cases they save you from using bad attorneys. I wish they'd been there when I chose an attorney for my Pennsylvania foreclosure. Listened.
So your divorce attorney, you mean?
My divorce attorney, yes.
Who did your foreclosure?
Yeah.
So Dave, before we head on to a few other questions, we've got any pearls of wisdom for the people out there who are kind of in similar positions you're in?
Similar positions. Oh, pearls of wisdom. Well, I'm probably the last person to. Just keep networking and educating yourself. I think this podcast is excellent. I mean, you guys are not marketing. You're telling it like it is. The good, the bad, the ugly. I love it. And I think that's what newbies like myself, I still consider myself a newbie, even though I've had several. And I got into notes because I created a note in the beginning, and then I had to learn about it. And I was like, oh, people do this for a living. Well, this is cool. So my first note was I created a note for somebody to help them out. And so the pearls of wisdom is just continue education and networking with good people.
Yeah, why don't you tell us about creating that note? That's not a typical first entry point into a note investing career.
It was.
Were you in real estate before that? Like, what were you doing?
No, this is actually well, sort of real estate. It's a very long story. I'm gonna try to put it down into a paragraph here.
You have
I had a friend of mine die, and he left me, not to me personally, but a couple $1 million for me and this other guy to do a Christian charity. And he had several properties. He was a hoarder. Properties were just filled to the max with stuff. And so we were selling off properties. We were doing all these things. At the same time, to do this charity, it's one of those 503Cs. You have to try to bring in income. And so we started funding flippers as hard money lenders. And then a friend of a friend, this guy, I told you I'd be quick. I'm sorry. Basically, there was this guy living in a trailer house, and he rented this trailer house for years. from this old lady who had this farm, and there was a couple acres set aside, and there was a trailer house on it. He rented it for years. And this guy was kind of slow mentally. He's not, and he wasn't able to just really just pick up and move. He ran a business out of it, doing like wood chopping and, you know, cutting down trees and everything like that. Well, anyway, the lady that owned the land and the property died. The son comes in, wants to kick him off. Well, he wasn't really, it was just cruel to make him move, you know, after this
Where would
point.
he go? Yeah.
Right. So what we did as a charity was we bought the property and rented it to him so that nobody could kick him off. And then we didn't want to hang on to the property, especially because we started finding out that he's kind of doing things on there that I don't want the county to go over there and look and then come after us, because he was his property was flooded. So he was coming out there with bulldozers and doing all this landscaping and stuff. And I was like, we don't want to hang on to this before we get in trouble. So we ended up turning it into a note to sell it to him. And he is, even though he's slow mentally, he's the type of guy that he saves his money and puts it in beer cans in the yard buried up, because every now and then he just we ended up selling 2 acres in a trailer house back to him for like $120,000. He puts $20,000 down, and he's paying every month double payments and $30,000 at a time.
Wow.
So he's really paying it off. And this is a trailer in the middle of nowhere on 2 acres. And so that's how I got into notes. We did this for him, and I had to learn how to do it because, you know, there's Dodd-Frank, there's all this stuff. I never heard of this stuff before. So I had to learn how to do it. And then that's how I got to Scott Carson's podcast.
You know, this is really interesting because when you have like such a fantastic first experience, it can be, I don't know, like a good thing or like really dangerous. Like, wow, we got this guy, he's like paying us all this money. He gave us a whole bunch of money, put $20,000 down.
Right. And then, you know, I had to, you know, we set up a loan with Madison to do it right. And then, but I just looked at one day and he paid like $30,000 twice.
Yeah.
So he's really paying it off. And this is one of those situations where it's a good deed. I mean, we kept this guy from getting kicked off the land from the son who wanted to take over, and now he owns it. Well,
that's
he's
awesome.
now the owner of it because we hold the note. This is a note, not a contract for deed.
Yeah, you gave him a path to be an owner. Like, that's amazing.
And,
and so like in the spirit of what the guy who left you the money like had in mind, you know, would be the kind of thing you would do. That's so cool. So it's just hard, you know, you got like such a like triple, you know, right out of the gate. So in my career, I've had probably 3 times when I just got like an amazing result. But, you know, there's an awful lot of just plodding along in between the really exciting things that happen. That's cool, David. Thank you for sharing that with us.
David,
thank you for having me on.
Yep, no problem. And Gail, why don't we move on to Eric's question about the BPO, and have Eric came up and mentioned that he had a BPO for an NPN in Alabama and was trying to purchase it for, call it 10 grand. And it's a second note, and it looked good and so forth. And he, you know, the comps he was running were in the mid 30s, and all of a sudden he gets a BPO back and it's quick sale 10, 30-day sale at 15. So how would you approach the seller with that information?
Yeah, well, I would share that BPO with the seller. Seller supplied BPOs. I don't know if the seller did supply one. They're often ridiculous. The data tree, you know, Chris loves data tree. I would love it if houses were really worth what they say they are. Like
I use it in the sense of I'll look to pull comps for stuff that's sold nearby, but I still put eyes on the property to see what condition it is compared to some of the comps, is kind of how I use it. I don't go off of their value. I go off of the properties that sold nearby. That's how I.
Yeah, obviously it would be crazy to spend $10,500 for a non-performing note on a house that's worth $10,000 to $15,000.
Yeah. Especially because the other thing with Alabama, you have to remember, is there is a 12-month redemption period after foreclosure. So
Yeah.
foreclosure is not that cheap in Alabama, and after you foreclose, you have to wait another year. So Alabama's can be tough for notes.
Yeah, Eric, where in Alabama is that? Is that Birmingham or some rural area?
Yep, Birmingham.
Birmingham.
Mhm.
Yeah, Birmingham's kind of famous for some really inexpensive houses. I would also actually ask a property manager like what it would rent for, and just see what kind of condition it's in, like
I
what you
wouldn't
can
bother.
tell visually from the outside. Well, I'm thinking like Eric's relatively new. Birmingham's, I like Birmingham.
Mhm.
And these kind of experiences are an opportunity to just kind of start to get to know Birmingham a little bit. And I don't know if you're interested in owning rentals, Eric, but I'm thinking
The
they
10 to
have decent rents relative to the value of the
yeah,
houses.
10 to 15 grand though.
Where I'm
That's
going. Well,
yeah, he likes rentals, but 10 to 15,000, if it's a 20 to $30,000 house in Birmingham, maybe, but the challenge will be, well, first off, the seller. I mean, if I was going to buy that from the seller, I'd probably offer him 2 to 3,000, is where I would probably come in at. And if I was going to fade the bid, and then at that point, if I'm in a deal for $3,000, to me, that's not a lot. So maybe you'd roll the dice on something like that. But it's but back to your original question. Yeah, just I would send an email to the seller saying, hey, look, the BPO came back, here's a copy of it, came in at this price, and this is what I'm going to do. Whether you fade your bid, whether you say I'm going to pass because I don't buy houses under 20 grand,
yeah.
that's fine.
I was going to say the other problem with a $10,000 house in Birmingham is it could be a really bad neighborhood. Like Birmingham is kind of, famous for that. It's got, I don't know, I drove around Birmingham with a wholesaler for a day. And a friend of mine who's a realtor there, when he found out where we had gone, he's like, you must be out of your mind going in there. Like driving there, even with the windows up and the doors locked, in the steaming heat of June. So yeah.
But you do what you want in the sense of whether you want to fade the bid or walk from it. But basically, when something like that occurs, you just give the information to the seller. That's what you can do. I went back to a seller today on 6 assets and said, hey, I'm passing on these assets, and here's a reason why. And 2 of them had been demolished, so that's pretty clear.
That's easy.
That's easy. 2 of them had title issues, and then 2 other ones, basically the report they showed said there was $210 owed in taxes, where it was about $17,000 in taxes. So a little bit of a difference there. So when you explain it to them, just say, hey, look, this was what, this wasn't what I was expecting. So
it's hard to be a truth teller to a seller. Like they do not want to hear these things, but
the ones who get more upset are the joker brokers, more than anything. If you're dealing with a fund or a legitimate broker, they know they know that happens. But the joker brokers are typically the ones who get upset.
Yeah, they're like the guys who come to repave your driveway and they just put like a tar slurry on and just kind of smooth it out, and then they need to be gone as quickly as possible before someone actually steps on it and realizes they didn't really do anything. The joker brokers, yeah, they want you to take the things and they want to be gone. And they're not, looking to build long-term relationships based on real value, unfortunately.
Good. Well, anybody else have any other questions that they want to pose to us this evening? So, Gail, anything else you would like to add based on any of the topics we covered tonight? I think,
I'm actually reading everything here.
Okay.
So Eric is into rentals. You know, we should talk about notes, the relationship between notes and rentals sometimes.
Yeah, I'd like to bring on also I'll say my partner in crime in North Carolina, who I've taken a bunch of properties back and owner financed into her, where she turns them into rentals because she's an agent, property manager, everything in the area, and she handles them and so forth, and it's a win-win because I've got somebody who's got 800 credit and basically getting financed these deals, and she's happy because she's cash flowing on them. And when people look for seller financing, it's interesting because most people, you think when you're seller financing, it's either like a fix and flipper or somebody who's got like a 450 credit score. But there's a lot of people you can work with who are out there, and again, they may not be able to go to the banks and get the loans, or it might just be they don't want to have to deal with the banks. And
Yeah.
if
Or
you
they're like contractors and they've got too many properties or whatever.
yeah.
So those are our favorites, contractors who want to buy your houses.
Yeah. So, but the big thing is, and again, it's finding somebody who, isn't just trying to lowball you on the price every time. It's getting to a number where it's comfortable for you, but it also works for them. And it's a win-win for both sides. So.
Cool.
Okay, Gail, I think we've answered most of the questions for everyone. Any last second thoughts?
No, I have to call someone. I have a closing tomorrow on my terrible property in Pennsylvania. So the buyer is texting me, this better not be bad news. I'm not in any.
I'm going to hang out with Katy Perry tomorrow night. So
Really?
Katy Perry, Norah Jones, and somebody else. I forget who. So
wow, that sounds awesome.
Yep. So
I didn't know you could stay up that late.
It's at like 8:00. So
okay.
The owner of my company, he's sponsoring, his foundation sponsoring a Silence the Violence event in Washington, D.C. And, they are the kind of the two of the three performers who will be there. So it's be a good time. So we got kind of pre-party with them and then, get to listen to the show. So.
Oh, man. Chris.
Life of a note investor.
You get around. You sure do. All right.
So, okay. Well,
we promise not to tell your wife what you're doing.
She's coming. So,
oh, okay.
Well, thank you all for joining us on this episode of Open Mic Night and Good Deeds Note Investing Podcast. One little tidbit I'll leave is for people who do renovations. I did upload in our Notes and Bolts Facebook group some sample contracts and scope of works for people. As well as if you leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or anything else, we'll send you that bank data tape. Or if there's anything else we've talked about, just send us an email and we'll figure out a way to send it to you. Essentially, is I think how it's been working lately. But also, we would appreciate it if you could leave us a review on one of those stations if you do appreciate the podcast. And as always, go out and do some good deeds. Gail, anything else?
Yep. Good night, everyone. I'm back to Simplify.
Good night, all.